Peter Schiff of Europac.com, manages billions. Of course, he was former chief advisor to Ron Paul, and his dad's a famous patriot, or was a famous patriot, who I was friends with. But he joins us today to, I guess, toot his horn. He's made a lot of predictions, and he's been saying that this whole gravy train that we've seen in the last 2 years is coming to an end, and well, we're on the knife's edge. I think we've already kind of gone down the roller coaster, haven't we?
Hey, Alex, how you doing? Happy New Year.
I'm watching history happen.
Yeah, I don't really want to toot my horn so much as sound the alarm, and because I've been saying this since Trump was inaugurated, but he inherited that big, fat, ugly bubble, and the problem was he owns it now because unfortunately he called it a boom and claimed credit for it, but he's going to own the bust. Remember that what he inherited from Obama was a disaster. I mean, that's why Trump was elected, because the recovery was phony. It was all engineered by cheap money and 0% interest rates and quantitative easing. That prevented the economy from going through a badly needed restructuring. It allowed the government to run enormous deficits under Obama without pushing interest rates up. And it pushed up the value of stocks and real estate so people could feel wealthier even though they weren't. And all of that, those assets collateralized all sorts of debt. We borrowed a lot of money during that time because of these inflated real estate prices and stock prices. And then Trump walks in and he kind of, adds air to the bubble by cutting taxes, but letting government spending continue to grow. So we had more debt. We postponed the bursting of that bubble. So instead of it bursting, early in his administration, now it's going to burst halfway through. And that means that the air is going to come out for the next 2 years, and we're going to be in a worse recession than the Great Recession when Trump is up for re-election. And that's going to be very difficult. The last president to run for re-election during a recession was Jimmy Carter. And that didn't work out well for Carter, but it worked out well for the nation because we got Ronald Reagan. Well, this time we're going to get the opposite of Ronald Reagan. We're going to end up with a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren type socialist as president in 2020 with the full support of a socialist Congress. So I think we have some dark days ahead, unfortunately.
Well, by the way, I wasn't being mean when I said toot your horn. I was tooting your horn for you that you were accurate. But listen, I know Trump's view. I've read his books about this. If we're in a global debt bubble acceleration and the big banks were giving the debt to themselves, the free money themselves, Trump's like, we got to grow a way out of this. We got to get some industry back. I'm damned if I have the bubble go. I'm damned if I don't. I should at least try to direct the bubble to the people. He basically said that. And then here comes the Federal Reserve with policy that you would agree with. Back when Obama was there, they should have raised rates, but they didn't. So then he raises it clearly politically on Trump, and then that signals the bubble imploding. I mean, if we're going to have the bubble implode, I think that's Trump's argument. Why not let it expand some more? So what about the argument that clearly the Federal Reserve has been targeting Trump politically, or you disagree with that?
Well, look, I don't think the president has a lot of fans at the Federal Reserve, but I don't know that those guys are smart enough to know how to target him. But, I actually think that had the Fed not raised rates, it would be worse right now, because the only reason the dollar hasn't imploded is because the Fed is raising rates and because people believe they're going to continue to raise rates. Now, I don't. I do believe that before, Trump is finished with this term, rates will be back at zero. And the Federal Reserve is going to be doing quantitative easing all over again, except it's going to backfire because it's not going to reflate asset bubbles. It's going to throw gasoline on the inflation fire.
So you're predicting that we're about to do 2008 repeat again?
Well, it's not going to be an exact repeat because in 2008, the dollar went up. This time, I think it's going to be a dollar crisis.
Oh, yeah, you did predict that, too. The dollar's been going down. You were on like 6 months ago and said that.
Yeah, and the dollar hasn't really gone anywhere. It's been going sideways because people still believe that the economy is much stronger than it is and that the Fed is going to be able to deliver more rate hikes. But, we haven't had economic growth really under Trump. We've just spent more borrowed money. Trump likes to talk about how we're having a resurgence in manufacturing, but we're not. The manufacturing numbers are terrible. The trade deficits under Trump are bigger than they've ever been. We have a record trade deficit. But at least
he's been trying to do something. Well, let's get to that next segment. But let me ask you this, Peter Schiff of Europe Pacific Capital, Europac.com. The nightmare scenario, though, we'll go to break, talk about it. I agree with you that if Hillary wouldn't have stolen it from Bernie, even though I hate Bernie and his policies, he would probably have beaten Trump. America's going that way. Look at Cortez as a bellwether. That woman is an idiot, and she won in a landslide. Yes. So I agree with you that if we don't do something right now, we're going to end up with basically communist in 2020. So start getting into that, because I think that's scary.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's communism, socialism. Communism is a form of socialism. I don't know that it's going to get that dire. But yeah, I mean, that's where we're headed.
I think Bernie getting elected, or Alexander Cortez, or Elizabeth Warren, I mean, they're basically communists. It's like Hugo Chavez called himself a socialist, and then once he got full power, he was a communist.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're socialists. I mean, communism, fascism, they're all forms of socialism. It's basically a belief that, that the free market doesn't work and that the government should do everything. And clearly, that's where the heart of the Democratic Party is right now, and we're moving in that direction. And that's why I'm afraid that Trump is going to get blamed. This crisis that's going to happen, Trump didn't cause it, right? He didn't.
No, you've been saying that. You've been dead on, and I wanted you to be wrong. You've been right. Let's just say it. Peter Schiff's right so far. All right. Peter Schiff of Europac.com, billions under management. You know him, all over CNBC, you name it. Has made a lot of accurate predictions. And he's been talking about the debt and what's happening in the dollar and all the rest of it. And so continuing then, what do you expect to see next? What do you think Trump should do versus what's been happening? And you're elaborating on Trump getting the blame for the process that was already going on. I mean, I know the Federal Reserve at first kind of suckered him in and said maybe things are going to grow. Then they said they weren't. And then they said it would never grow up past 3%. It did. That kind of made people get more exuberant. What's really going on, and what's coming next?
Yeah, first of all, though, I got a few things in common with you. CNBC banned me about 2 years ago. So I haven't been on there in a long time. So I have a hard time getting on the mainstream.
What got you banned? He used to be all over the place.
I have no idea. The last time I was supposed to be on was a couple of years ago. I was scheduled to be on with Rick Santelli, who used to invite me on quite a bit. And then I got canceled last minute, and I haven't been invited on since. And Rick had no idea why I got canceled, but that was my last scheduled appearance. I get on Fox Business every once in a while, but I mean, I'm not on CNN anymore. I'm not on Bloomberg. They banned me. They were the first to probably ban me 8-9 years ago, after I was on almost every week before the financial crisis. So they don't like, my opinion getting out there. But let me just get back to, what we're talking about with Trump. Because Trump claimed credit for the boom and said it was he did it with his policies and he made America great again. Because of that, when this whole thing comes crashing down in the second half of his term, he has made it so easy for the Democrats to blame him. I mean, this is going to be easier than it was blaming Bush for the 2008 crisis. That's what made it so easy for Obama to beat John McCain. Well, it's going to be even easier for whoever the Democrats nominate to beat Trump when we are in a massive recession. And they're going to blame it on tax cuts, on deregulation, on everything that Trump did is going to get blamed. What Trump should have done when he was first elected, instead of trying to be popular and trying to make it easy, he should have basically delivered the bad news and basically said, look, we've had 8 years of a phony economy. In fact, it began long before Obama. We have to deflate this bubble. We're going to have to go through a protracted recession to get our economic house in order. If we want to make America great again, here's what we need to do. We need to shrink government. We need to cut government spending. We need to rein in entitlements. We need to cut regulations so we can produce and save. We need higher interest rates. The stock market's going to come down. The real estate market's going to come down. But if we want to produce again and export and do all these things that we did when we were great, this is what we need to do. We need to swallow this bitter tasting medicine. But Trump didn't want any part of that. He became a big cheerleader for everything he criticized. All of a sudden, he wanted more cheap money. He wanted higher stock prices. He wanted more spending. He just wanted to keep the bubble going before he got out of Dodge. And he wanted to claim credit for the bubble. The problem is, he's not going to get out of Dodge.
But let's stop right there.
While he's there.
Let's stop right there, though. Yeah. I mean, the bubble wasn't getting to the people before. They couldn't get above 3%. Trump and the exuberance and getting some industry back and, America First did get a lot of people excited. And so it did inflate the bubble way bigger than they thought, which I think kind of scared the Federal Reserve. I mean, let's give him some credit. He sure the hell pumped that bubble up.
I don't want to give somebody credit for pumping a bubble. I want credit for letting the bubble deflate. Bubbles are a problem. They distort the economy. They can feel good, just like drugs. But I don't want to encourage somebody to become a heroin addict because it feels good.
Sure, well, let me be honest. I mean, I'm sure you were offered this too. Let me be conservative. I could have made the last 6-7 years $300 million, literally, going with all the Bitcoin people and everything else. I know what people got paid. I had them offering me $1 million a month, real companies, just 2 years ago. And I never endorsed it because I thought at the end of the day it was going to be like the tulip, fiasco in the Netherlands a couple hundred years ago. I'm not saying crypto isn't real. I'm not saying digital currencies aren't okay. I said it was bad news. I think marijuana stocks long-term are a total bubble because everybody and their dog's involved in it. And so people say, oh, I get offered all this money to promote marijuana stocks. I'm not doing it. So I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't like bubbles either. I'm just saying,
at least you could smoke marijuana. You can't do anything with Bitcoin or any of these cryptocurrencies. So they're going to zero. Some of these pot stocks will survive, but yeah, most of them are probably way overvalued because people don't, understand how much competition is actually going to be in this market when the big tobacco companies are finally getting involved. But I applaud the fact that you resisted the temptation to subject your audience to a Ponzi scheme. I'm sure a lot of people in the crypto universe wanted to get you pumping all those coins so they can dump them on your audience. And it's good for you that you didn't fall for that because a lot of people. Let's be clear.
Years ago, we're not going to say any names. I wasn't sophisticated like you were 8-9 years ago. You called me and said, hey, you're not just promoting some dude's newsletter. It's a whole stock deal. So I had to learn, like, oh, I'm not just promoting a newsletter. So when it got to Bitcoin, I'm like, and I was kind of when it hit like the biggest thing in the world, bigger than JP Morgan, bigger than Goldman Sachs. And I'm like, was I wrong? But then it just went last December straight down. And I can sit back and tell my audience now, I did not tell you to do it, did I? But sometimes I go, man, could have sure funded the company with $300 million, but I'd probably go to prison.
Yeah, and we're not finished going down. I mean, people made money if they got in early. But of course, those gains are going to equal the losses by all the people who got in late. And by the time they were trying to pay you to pump it, it was late. They weren't trying to get you to pump Bitcoin when it was $1 or $5 or $10.
No, they were begging me to do it starting 2 years ago and then into its peak. It was like, just take it. It's $1 million. Just come on. It's a great deal. I had like movie stars calling me and stuff.
Yeah, look, they always end badly, but the Bitcoin is just a microcosm for the whole United States. Our whole economy is a gigantic bubble. And, had Hillary Clinton won, I don't think the Fed ever would have raised rates again. They raised rates only one time before Trump was elected.
Sure, so that's my question. Why? So they clearly did something different because it was Trump.
No, because Trump enabled them to get in a few more hikes by blowing more air into the bubble. And you talk about the 3% GDP growth. We only got that for a couple of quarters. I'm not even sure if we're going to be at 3% for all of 2018. We didn't get it for 2017. But whatever the GDP ends up being this year, this is going to be the high watermark. We're going down. We're probably going to be in a recession in GDP next year, and we're not going to get out of it.
That's my next question. A lot of economists are saying 20% reduction bare minimum. Some are saying 50%, and they're predicting great mainstream news, and I'm not saying that's right then, as they lie so much, a Great Depression scenario.
Well, the Great Depression is going to happen after the Democrats get in 2020. I mean, because I guess the good news is they're going to screw it up even more. I mean, if you want to call that good news, because we might have a shot of taking back the country in 2024. But, Hoover, was in office when the Depression started, but it really didn't become a depression until Roosevelt made it a depression by basically taking all the failed policies of Hoover and expanding them. And so I think when the Democrats take over this massive recession, they will turn it into a depression, except it's going to be an inflationary depression. So it's not going to be a depression where stuff gets less expensive, because that actually makes a
Sure.
depression not as bad.
So you're predicting stagflation in 2021?
Except not just stagnation, an actual recession. I'm talking about big inflation and recession at the same time, not just slow growth.
Has that ever happened before?
Contraction. Well, I don't know. In the 1970s, I don't think the economy was actually contracting. I think it was still going up. But, a lot of it has to do with the way they calculate inflation. So it's probably happened, but the government hasn't officially acknowledged it. because of the way they score it. But I think that this time, even the government numbers are going to show a contracting economy.
So let me ask you this then. What are you investing in?
Well, look, I haven't changed my strategy. I've been investing the same way. To me, it's amazing that this bubble has gone on this big. And again, had Trump not been elected, it would have popped 2 years ago. And I think the dollar would already be falling. Gold would already be taken off because the Fed would already be back in zero. They'd already be doing quantitative easing. So I think people should be getting out of the dollar before the bottom drops out, getting out of overpriced U.S. stocks and bonds, getting into better valued assets outside the United States. There are better valued.
Sure. I mean, does gold only go up or other commodities go up?
Well, I think all the commodities are ultimately going to go up. I think gold's going to go up the most. So I think you're going to see a deflation in that. I think commodity prices will fall in terms of real money, which is gold and silver. But I think prices are going to rise in terms of, all these paper substitutes like dollars or even euros.
I know you got to go, but it's a 2-minute break. If you'll do 5 more minutes, I want to get back into Bitcoin because I'm not a rocket scientist like you managing billions of dollars.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Just have to have common sense.
No, I know. So I want to hear about Bitcoin because I agree with you, not just Bitcoin. And people are really pissed when I do this. I get death threats. I think it's going to go to zero. I mean, let's come back in 2 minutes to talk about that. All right, Peter Schiff of Europac.com is our guest. Looking at all the cryptocurrencies, what happened, who's really behind it. Clearly, big companies were involved. It was a pump. It was a dump. And, yeah, I got offered a lot of money over the years, $100,000, a month to advertise, and $1 million in advertising, all these different big top groups calling me. And I could tell. I even, told my wife this last year. I said, I'm getting offered by 5 or 6 companies a day now, millions of dollars a month to advertise this. I go, I think they're just trying to set me up when it goes down that my name's on it. So I'm glad I didn't. But you've been an early critic of all this. What's the post-mortem on the cryptocurrency so far, and will they go to zero?
Well, I think initially when it first got started, there was a lot of well-intentioned people in there that, didn't like the central banks and fiat currencies and were looking for an alternative. And, I just don't believe that these cryptocurrencies ultimately can be money. They just don't have the qualities that you need to be money. But what happened as a bubble started in these things and the prices went up, that's when all that money came in to try to profit from it. And that's when you had all the pump and dumpers and all the scams and the hysteria. I had clients calling me up when Bitcoin was $15,000 wanting to put their entire IRA because they thought it's going to $1 million. I had to talk a lot of people out of that. I mean, nobody was calling me up when Bitcoin was $10 or $100, but when it was 10, 15,000, I mean, people kept calling, and there was a lot of hysteria, but it was all a bunch of nonsense. And yeah, all these currencies, there's 2,000 or so different cryptocurrencies. None of them have any real value, but as long as people think they're going up because they think there's a greater fool. In fact, they don't even know it's a greater fool because they just think that this is, this revolution. And I talk to these guys. There's a lot of them here in Puerto Rico where I live that have come down here. And some of these guys are still passionate about it, and I hear them talk about it, and they don't even realize they're saying a bunch of nonsense. Nothing makes sense, but they think I'm just some old fool who doesn't get it. They're so trapped in their own bubble, they can't see it. And it's ironic because nobody can see their own bubble. The people who are in Bitcoin, they can see the bubble in the dollar or the stock market or the real estate market, but they don't see the bubble in Bitcoin, just like a lot of people on Wall Street. Jamie Dimon, he can say, there's a bubble in Bitcoin, but he doesn't see there's a bubble in the stock market or the U.S. economy.
Sure, so let me ask you this.
It's all in the eye of the beholder. Yeah.
Reuters and others reported, back last year, 950 billion Bitcoin, just Bitcoin is bigger than Goldman Sachs. Obviously, there were people extracting everybody else's wealth in the Ponzi scheme. What's the inside baseball on who made all that money? I know I wouldn't take it because, I'm not a criminal. I might as well just rob banks when I'm going to act like that. You didn't either, which makes me respect you. What in the hell? Who needs to get in trouble here?
Well, remember, a lot of the money is still just on paper, right? Because it doesn't really exist. It's just a price. It's not real until you cash out. The people who made money were the people who cashed out, who got in early and cashed out. But the problem
is that what brought it down? Is that people cashed out?
Well, they started to. They haven't even finished. Look, it's still at, 3,600, 3,800, wherever it is. It's got a ways to go down. This is still a high price. But then you had all these companies that got started, all this malinvestment. People are anticipating institutional demand and all this stuff happening. This is all malinvestment. It's all going to be liquidated. But again, this is a microcosm of the broader economy. This is just one of the bubbles that has been created by central bankers. And, but you have to have a real safe haven. I think a lot of people who got distracted, they should have been buying gold and they got caught up in cryptocurrencies. They should come back to gold while they can and get into some real safe haven investments. That's what I'm trying to do with my clients at Euro Pacific Capital through my asset management company that I run here in Puerto Rico, is really prepare people for the collapse, not only of the fiat currencies.
All right,
but
well, let's do this thing, because you said you could stay a little bit longer. Do a few more minutes. This is a 1 minute break.
Yeah.
What will the collapse look like? And again, going back to this cryptocurrencies for a moment, how do we get people that are in it out of the brainwashing? Because it's like a Nigerian phone scam or email scam. I've had this happen to family. Once they've been scammed, they don't want to admit they've been scammed, and then they stay in the scam. All right, I don't want to say he's right, but he's been right before the crash 10 years ago and right now. And obviously, I know it's a bubble, but he was trying to get industry back. The Chi-Coms get their bubble, everybody else gets their bubble, and then the Federal Reserve raises rates, clearly trying to target the recovery, which I get is overall a false recovery. But if it gets Americans to believe in America again, to get some industry back, to secure the border and have sovereignty, then I was trying to get behind the president, and I'm behind him on going after China and their infiltration and going after the open border and all the rest of it. But then you look at the whole situation with the cryptocurrencies and how people got sucked into that, just like they get sucked into socialism or communism or Bernieism or Alexander Cortezism. And I agree exactly with what he's saying. And he's been saying it for a while, but it's clear. He was saying this a couple of years ago, and I'm like, oh, yeah, America's not that dumb to go socialist or communist. And now, when the left goes super hard left, man, people, bing, 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 they want to hear that everything's free and everything's going to be great. So I kind of like Trump's bubble version of that, because at least it's pro-America, you see, instead of the Venezuelan model. So, and I'm being honest with the listeners. If I'm like stuck in a mine shaft and there's two tunnels out and both are collapsing, but this one looks a little better, I'm going to try to crawl up through that. So I'll dispense with the metaphors here. The owner and manager of Europac.com, Peter Schiff, Billions Under Management. What in your brain can Trump do now to change course if you think he's wrong, just for hypothetical discussion, and navigate out of this? What is your message to the president? Because I can definitely get this to him. And obviously, you can probably get messages to the president as well. What would you say to Trump about what you think he should do now?
Okay, well, first of all, false confidence is a very dangerous thing, whether it's confidence in the economy or confidence in cryptocurrencies. It causes you to do things that you shouldn't do. And you can get excited that, yes, the president got a lot of people to be optimistic early on, but all these people are going to be disappointed when their optimism turns out to be unwarranted, and they're going to take out their frustrations on Trump and other Republicans. That is the problem. Now, what could he do now to repair the damage? I don't know if it's repairable. I mean, he have to come out and basically say, I was wrong. The economy isn't great. I didn't make America great again. I made the big, fat, ugly bubble bigger, fatter, and uglier. But now, I've come to my senses, and this is what we need to do. And we have to slash government spending, and I have to cut Social Security and Medicare, and, we're going to have the stock market going way down, and real estate prices are going to fall. Peter.
This
stuff has to happen.
Peter, most of that's real world, but literally, he didn't build the bubble, as you said. If he did that, everything would plunge. He would be removed. Would be impeached next week.
No, he didn't build it, but he branded it with a big giant T. I mean, what he should have done is, if he would have bit the bullet day one and used his popularity, and hey, I am not a career politician. I'm a statesman. I'm not doing what's politically. I don't care about my own reelection. Let's just finally get this house in order, and done it day one. Yes, the stock market never would have gone up. We would have had a bear market right away. We would have gone right into recession. We would have dealt with our problems instead of kicking the can down the road for a couple more years while the problems got bigger. Now it's going to be too late. There's no way we're going to be on the upswing
here's the
by the time he's up for re-election.
Peter Schiff, here's the existential threat. And you're right in mathematics. You're absolutely correct. No one denies that, who's got a brain. But food stamp money runs out in like a month. You've got half the public lazy people who absolutely have a hard-on for Bernie Sanders in a good way, and who are delusional. And so
yes,
we're stuck in this bubble. We're stuck in all this crap. No,
Trump made it so much easier for Bernie Sanders or whoever he, handpicks as his successor to win. That is the problem. Things are now going to get so bad, and it's all going to be blamed on lower taxes on the rich and corporations and deregulation and whatever Trump stands for, that's what's going to be blamed on. And now the public is going to grasp for the only savior they've got left, which is going to be a socialist who is going to promise everything's going to be better. Just trust the government. We tried capitalism. It didn't work. It didn't work under Bush. It was a disaster under Trump. Everything was great after Obama. Trump screwed it all up with his capitalism and his business and his tax cuts.
Sure.
Now we have to have socialized medicine, government guaranteed jobs, $15 minimum wage, universal basic income.
Which will really cause stuff to tank.
Oh, no, they are going to turn this recession into an inflationary depression. And we have one shot to take our country back, and that's 2024. Because if we don't turn away from socialism in 2024, we'll never turn away from it. I mean, it'll be here forever, right? Just like the New Deal programs, only this is a much worse deal.
So let me ask you this question, Peter Schiff, of Euro Pacific Capital. Pulling back from this, there's no education program to get to collectivists, and they believe in what they're doing. But the controllers know this is about domesticating populations. Why would the establishment and the big mega banks and the power elite build in a socialist system that ends up destroying productivity? I know it creates a consolidation of power, but why would you want to consolidate something that sucks instead of ride something that's really successful and beautiful? So I'm almost trying to wake the public up, and we've got a great audience, and they're amazing. But sometimes I just think what really angers them that we do is sometimes we're able to talk to Congress folks or the president. That's what worries the elite, is that we might actually try to influence the establishment. Is there any way to get the establishment to put the brakes on collectivism? And why does the establishment keep pushing for it?
Well, the establishment is changing. I mean, who is actually in the establishment? I mean, if you look at the Democratic Party, it is shifting to the left. More and more people are buying into this nonsense. And so the establishment is going to look different in 2020 than it has looked in the past. It's going to be much more, socialist minded. And this legislation is going to come in. Now, of course, there's always people who are going to be able to survive socialism. There's always a handful of wealthy people that are well connected that manage to preserve their wealth, but the vast majority of people are going to suffer. The people who are going to suffer the most are the people who think they're going to benefit the most. It's all the poor or the middle class that are buying into this nonsense, that think government's going to make their lives better.
Right. Can you imagine if the Alexandria Cortezes got control of the U.S., they would have all our nuclear weapons, everything. This is a global crisis.
It's a good thing she's not 35. Otherwise, she might be able to run for president and win. That's how ridiculous this is. But hopefully the Supreme Court can save us, because, if we get a few good justices in there, everything that the socialists are going to try to do is going to be unconstitutional.
And is that why they're so upset? Obviously, because they are so upset about the Supreme Court.
Well, I guess, and hopefully we'll see if the Supreme Court could actually rise to the occasion, because in the past, I think the judiciary has been a failure. I mean, because they've let the people down. They haven't forced the government to abide by the Constitution, because almost everything the government does now is unconstitutional. Oh, yeah,
Kavanaugh's already been voting against Trump, and we've seen socialist decisions just the last week, because it's just incredible what a bunch of swamp creatures they are.
But, they might be our last defense against a lot of this stuff that the Democrats are going to pass through Congress and that a socialist will sign. Maybe the Supreme Court will strike it down, because all this stuff is not authorized by the Constitution. And so we'll see. We finally had a decent justice, in Texas, said Obamacare was unconstitutional, which it is. And so hopefully that decision will survive.
How long, we're almost out of time, but how long do you think Ruth Bader Ginsburg can hold on with methamphetamine and steroids she's reportedly on?
I don't know. They're trying to keep her alive, but she should resign at this point. If she's obviously in ill health, but maybe she's trying to hang on until 2021.
All right, Peter Schiff, Europac.com, another censored patriot. Amazing info. Wow. Talk to us again soon.